There is a man who built $2 billion companies using the exact same rule, twice, in two industries that have nothing to do with each other. And when he started, he had $700 to his name, a 2-year-old son, and no front door. He was sleeping in a car. The car was a 20-year-old Rolls-Royce, which sounds like a punchline until you understand it was the only thing he owned that still looked like success. Everything most people would call a safety net was already gone. What he had left was one idea about how money actually compounds, and the discipline to hold that idea when holding it hurt. The man is John Paul DeJoria, and before any of this, his resume reads like a list of jobs that quietly didn't work out. He was a janitor, an insurance salesman, and an encyclopedia salesman who knocked on doors and heard no for a living. He spent 2 years in the Navy. He took a job at a hair care company called Redken, and that one ended the way several of his jobs ended, which is to say, he got fired. By his mid-30s, he had a stack of dead-end positions behind him, and not much to show for any of them. But the encyclopedia years had taught him something most people never learn, because most people quit before the lesson arrives. When you sell door-to-door, the money is never in the first sale. The money is in the customer who comes back without being chased. A one-time buyer is a transaction, and a transaction has to be re-earned from scratch every single day you wake up. A customer who reorders on their own is an annuity, and an annuity quietly compounds while you sleep. That distinction sounds like a small thing. It is, in fact, the whole game, and almost nobody organizes a business around it because the first sale is the one that feels urgent when rent is due. In 1980, with that one idea and $700, he partnered with a gifted hairdresser named Paul Mitchell, and half of that $700 was borrowed from DeJoria's mother. They had enough money for 2 products and a label, so they put both products in a plain black and white bottle, partly as a design choice and partly because color printing cost money they simply did not have. The result was, in a strange way, the most confident-looking thing on any shelf. The most ordinary-looking premium product in the building, betting that the people selling it would explain the rest. Here is where almost anyone else in his position would have folded. The company was broke in the most literal sense, with cash so tight that some of the early checks bounced before the deposits had time to clear, and the obvious lifeline was sitting right there in plain sight. Put the bottles in drugstores. Mass retail, shelves in every town in America. Real money in the door by tomorrow afternoon. For a man sleeping in a car, that is not a strategic question. That is food. He said no. Saying no to revenue when your own checks are bouncing looks completely insane from the outside. It wasn't. It was the reorder idea again, except this time enforced as a hard rule about where the product was allowed to live. And that rule is the thing that turned a broke startup into an empire. DeJoria's bet was that a hairdresser is the single most powerful reorder engine in the world. A stylist who recommends a product is not making one sale. They are effectively writing a prescription the client refills every few weeks for years. And crucially, a stylist only recommends what makes their own work look good, because their reputation rides on it. Now look at the same bottle in 2 places. Put it in a drugstore next to 40 cheaper competitors, and it instantly becomes a price comparison the customer makes alone, in an aisle, with no one to explain why it costs more. Keep it behind the chair. Hand it over by the professional the client already drove across town to trust, and it becomes a recommendation from an expert. One of those situations compounds for years. The other one quietly bleeds margin until there is nothing left. So he held the line on salon-only distribution, even in the months when mass retail was waiving cash he badly needed. The discipline paid off on a timeline that would have broken most founders' nerve. By year 3, the company crossed $1 million in gross sales, and the curve never really stopped after that. Today, John Paul Mitchell Systems is the largest privately held professional hair care company in the world, with estimated retail sales of roughly $1 billion a year, sold through more than 100,000 salons across dozens of countries. He never took the company public, he never sold a controlling piece of it, and he never once put it in a drugstore. Now comes the part that proves the first empire wasn't luck, wasn't charisma, wasn't a one-time fluke wearing a nice story. In 1989, a friend of his named Martin Crowley came back from a work trip to Mexico carrying a hand-blown bottle and a pitch. The two of them should start a tequila company. DeJoria, by his own admission, knew essentially nothing about tequila. What he knew was the rule, and the rule does not care what industry you point it at. So he ran the exact same play in a market that had nothing to do with hair care. They made their first run of 12,000 bottles and priced them at around $37. At the time, tequila in America was mostly a cheap slam-it-and-wince spirit, and the experts he talked to told him the realistic ceiling was about 20,000 cases a year. A $37 bottle of tequila sounded absurd to almost everyone who heard the number. It was also the entire point of the exercise. The price was never just a number, it was a position, a claim staked in public. It said, in effect, that this is the bottle you put on the table when you want the night to feel like an occasion. This is the tequila you sip slowly and a little ceremoniously, not the one you bury in a mixer and hope nobody tastes. That is premium positioning, defended on purpose, and it is the same move as the salon shelf wearing a different costume. The 20,000 case ceiling turned out to be off by a factor of more than 100. Patron did not hit 20,000 cases. It grew toward 3.5 million cases a year, and along the way, it effectively created the entire premium tequila category that nearly every other brand later rushed in to copy. The thing the experts said couldn't exist became the template the whole industry chased. The exit came in 2 steps, and the second step is the one most retellings of this story quietly skip. After Martin Crowley died, the global spirits giant Bacardi took a minority stake in the business in 2008. The proceeds from that sale went to Crowley's estate and to the charitable trust he had set up to educate underprivileged children. DeJoria stayed on as the principal owner and kept running the very same playbook for another full decade. Then in 2018, Bacardi came back and bought the rest of it in a deal that valued Patron at $5.1 billion. It is worth saying plainly what just happened, because the symmetry is the whole lesson. The same founder ran the same rule in a second, unrelated industry and produced a second billion-dollar outcome. Strip away the car and the bouncing checks and the famous bottles and look at what actually carried the weight in both stories. It was never a product. Shampoo and tequila have nothing in common. It was a decision about where the product was allowed to exist, made before there was any money to justify it, and defended when saying yes would have been so much easier. In hair care, the rule was sold only through the professional who reorders, never the shelf that compares. In tequila, the rule was priced as an occasion, never as a commodity. Both are the same move underneath. Build the thing customers come back to, charge in a way that protects that, and refuse the fast money that would quietly turn your asset into a price tag. The hard part was never thinking of the rule. Plenty of people understand recurring revenue and premium positioning in the abstract. The hard part was the no, turning down the drugstore while the checks bounced, pricing at $37 while the experts laughed. The strategy is cheap and almost obvious. The discipline to hold it when the easy money is in the room is the entire business. So when the question is how a man with $700 and no front door built 2 separate billion-dollar empires, the honest answer is that he didn't really build 2 companies at all. He built one rule, wrote it down in his head somewhere on the road selling encyclopedias, and then he had the nerve to obey it twice, while everyone around him offered him easier ways to break it. The Rolls-Royce he slept in was 20 years old and barely ran. He kept it for decades after he could have bought 1,000 new ones, parked where he'd see it, a reminder that the $700 was never the asset. The refusal to spend it the easy way was.